I went to sleep really early yesterday, and um, I couldn't sleep because I woke up in the middle of the night, and then I was just like not tired any longer. But there were some things that I wanted to talk about, but I just couldn't bother to get my computer out, and it was too dark. But yeah, I was watching Panorama the other day, and okay, my first reaction when I saw it was that yeah, this is pretty terrible. Some of the stuff the police officers say about how they're kind of like laughing at restraining people and then kind of adding a few extra pressure points so that basically they hurt them unnecessary, and they were kind of confessing to this. And I was judging them for it, yes, and I was seeing it bad. Although technically, when I actually first found that program, it was on TV, and I turned the TV on, and it was like halfway through, and it wasn't actually about any. It wasn't about bad police officers. It was about a bad police officer specifically talking about Islam, and saying that he wants to shoot them all. And I was really interested in that, and then for some reason, whatever happened, the signal sort of broke, and I lost signal on the TV. And then because I've been recording it, I went to watch it from the beginning, and it turned out that it was actually about just lots of bad police officers, and the part about the Islam was actually only just a small part of it. But it because I only watched a small part of it on TV, it kind of felt like the whole thing was about it. And there was some sort of librarian looking lady kind of insulting it, and to say how appalling it is and how awful it is and stuff. And I was kind of I didn't agree with her on the Islam thing, because I think you should shoot them all. Like I really don't like Islam because I think it's dangerous for our Western society. I feel like a lot of people are coming here to attack us, and they don't want to live in this world to let us live our life. I think they want to come into this world so that they can enforce Sharia law. I think there's a lot of people who are coming into this country because they want us to for England to be an Islamic country. And I don't know what's going on, but I know that they've been having loads and loads and loads of babies. I know Africa is in a massive place. I know there's a lot of Muslims all over third world countries, and these third world countries, the people are not very bright, so they have just more and more children, more and more babies, and it's almost like they have like a breeding need, because they I feel like they're more like animals. They think more like animals, and animals, birds have babies every year. A nest isn't just one baby; it's usually like 5 or 6 and stuff. So I feel like it's an unintelligent thing. Not all unintelligent people have loads of babies, but a typical unintelligent thing to do is to just breed, because that's kind of like a natural instinct. A smart person wants to focus on themselves and getting a good education, getting a good job, buying a good house. A smart person wants to have kids, but wants to have 2 or 3 kids. And a dumb person has this instinct to just want to have as many kids as possible without thinking about whether or not they'll actually be able to look after these kids. And yeah, they also don't use condoms and stuff. I think that's also a religious thing to not use condoms, but obviously the Muslim worlds have been getting more and more full, and now they're all coming over here all at the same time because they all know about us because of the internet and stuff like this. But yeah, I'll go to the point, which is that I was watching this film and I was feeling like a lot of the stuff they were saying was bad, but then when I started listening to Tears of Fears, is that, or Fear of Shit? No, Tears of Fears, which is a band that I've called Angel of the Wise or Angel for the Wise, and I think they got me to analyse the things a bit better, because technically, okay, so for example, there was one person who apparently her stomach had been kicked. Apparently there was some red marking on her stomach, and she was basically saying that she was pregnant, and that her partner had just kicked her in the stomach, and she was now wanting him to be arrested, but they let him out a few days later on bail, and someone was saying that is wrong, and this guy was just like, oh, well, that's what she said. And it is bad that he said that, because it almost implies like he doesn't believe her. But I kind of, when I was thinking about it more logically, it's like, well, technically I don't know what this woman looks like. I don't know how obvious this bump is, because some women would be willing to lie and say that they're pregnant even if they're not. If they've been kicked in the stomach and they want to hurt by their partner, and they want to hurt their partner, they could even say that they're pregnant when they're not, and this mark, I don't even know if he saw this mark, and I don't know the details about it, and so it is bad. And also you don't know what the person looks like, because there are some, homeless, chavvy, alcoholic, drug addict people that can get pregnant. And just because they're pregnant, that doesn't mean that they automatically telling the truth. And it's bad to assume that she's not telling the truth. But I think it's also bad to assume that he is wrong, even if you don't know anything about this woman, because there are plenty of liars. And maybe he had a reason for not believing her. Maybe she had a massive attitude on her. Maybe she didn't even look pregnant. Maybe she, if you think about it, you don't know the sort of the detail of why he responded that way. So that's just one example. You shouldn't just assume that someone is telling that someone believes. You shouldn't just assume that if someone doesn't believe someone, that it's because, he doesn't respect women. Because if that woman looked like a tramp, if that woman looked like a liar, some people I feel have this energy on them that makes me question what they say. Something about them makes me think that I don't believe this, and I don't know, I don't even know if the bump was obvious. That she might not even looked pregnant. It's possible. You don't usually look pregnant until you're 3, 4 months, 5 months pregnant. So and if she was also overweight or large, she could have literally just been a little bit fat. So because of that, you can't judge that police officer for saying something bad, saying that a woman's not pregnant and been kicked in the stomach. I mean, technically, no. I would love to believe that the world was a nice place and that people would not lie about being kicked in the stomach whilst pregnant. I would love to believe that every woman in the world would not lie about that. But I can't say for certain that everyone would, because there are some women who would lie about being pregnant just to hurt, just to insult their partner. If they've been kicked in the stomach, they want to hurt their partner. Now, if they tell their partner they're pregnant, even if the partner doesn't know, that could be an example of them lying to hurt their partner, and then going to the police to hope that to put them into jail. It is possible. I would want to believe that the world is much nicer than it is, but it's not, and because of that, I feel like I shouldn't judge a police officer unless I actually know the circumstances. There's another example where someone was through an autistic young boy, 19 or something, threw a pillow at an officer. The officer and 2 others came in, sort of tackled him to the ground. They pressed an alarm. Suddenly 8 officers were in the room. They didn't know how this scuffle started. A lot of them didn't realise that it started simply from a pillow throw. And the 2 officers, I'm sure 2 officers knew that it was, 2 or 3 officers knew that it was just a pillow throw. But the thing is, okay, it looks bad. But at the same time, you don't know the history of that person, because there are some people, some drunky laddie white people who literally just insult police officers and give them all sorts of verbal attacks, and they might also get quite physical when in attacks. And so you don't really know the background, and if someone is in a prison cell and has been in a prison cell for 24 hours or 5 hours, and they've just constantly screaming or constantly doing stuff, it might actually be building up sort of an anger in a lot of the police officers. And if something like a pillow throw is what triggers that to overreact, that was what the thing was about. He threw a pillow and they overreacted and held him down for over 2 hours because of this. It is an unnecessary level of force. That was an unnecessary level of force, and it shouldn't have happened. But at the same time, you don't really know that the details of that. Was that guy being violent during his arrest? Was he being did he destroy public property outside? Was he, you don't really know the story or the background or what they know. And you could probably insult me for a lot of my posts. A lot of my posts, sometimes I do get triggered and I do just start being really angry, and you might say, oh, that video doesn't justify this angry message above it, and maybe you're right. But at the same time, you don't know the history that I have gone through that has made me give this really angry message. You don't know how much torment I feel like I've gone through my life, and so something like this is triggered. I think if a police officer has been working in a bad area, in a bad location, if there's a ton of people that hate the police force, and if their whole life now is just about people insulting them, oh, you're the police officers, we don't like you, calling them pigs or whatever, I think it builds up anger in them. It builds up triggering moments, and it would be far easier to be triggered now. Okay, there is a point where you have to be fired because your anger starts building up so much so that you can no longer do the job. I know that, but this is the sort of librarian, posh-looking lady. Oh, this is terrible. Oh, we can't have this. We've got to have a better standard. To me, at the time, I was agreeing with a lot of the stuff that she was saying, except for the Islamic posts. I think I absolutely hate Islam, and I have reason for it. And she couldn't tell the difference between an officer that was rightfully saying, wrongfully saying bad things against the people he's arresting, versus an Islamic a police officer that's saying bad things against Islam. Islam is a problem, and if you think that there's a problem with saying Islam is a problem, then I think actually the problem was with you, because you can't tell the difference. But now that I've been thinking about it more, I feel like she was actually wrong. I mean, maybe she knew more about what, if you're doing a documentary about Panorama, you can only see certain footages, but maybe there's a whole bunch of other things you knew. Maybe you've been told a lot more stuff that hasn't actually been said, and maybe you've seen a lot more footage, so I don't know what would make her sit in front of a camera and actually want to insult police officers based on the small clips that I saw. Maybe she knew a lot more than that, but yeah, thinking about it, I would not want to insult police officers based on a couple of things that they do, a couple of things that I said, because I am not a police officer. I do not know what it's like to work as a police officer not 24 hours, but all day, 9 to 5 or 9 to 8, every single day for a year, 2 years, 3 years. I think only when you go through this experience and put yourself in a police officer's position and have to know the sort of experiences that they've gone through and the types of people they have to deal with on a daily basis, you become the people that you're with according to who you're surrounded by, who you're hanging with. And police officers, you have to hang with police officers, but you also have to go to where the crime is, go to where the bad people are, go to where the people who are calling the police on other people, and you have to deal with the sort of worst type of people in society. Now, if you're working with the worst type of people in society, you will find that these people affect you. You will find you get angry by these people. You will find that if there's a bunch of people that literally start screaming that they want to hurt you but don't actually hurt you, you didn't hurt them, they didn't hurt you, nothing happened. You have to try and keep the peace and keep calm, but you might find the next time you get an arrest and that person you arrest reminds you of all the people that have sworn at you, or all the people that have looked down at you or spat on you or tried to spat on you and then run off so you couldn't actually catch them. You might start taking your anger out on the people you do catch, and I think it would be wrong for a librarian-looking woman to just come in and insult. Oh, that's not very nice. Oh, that shouldn't be in the police office. Does she know what it's like to be a police officer? Has she actually experienced being on the ground? It's one thing to insult a war and people who are fighting in a war, but it's another thing to actually be in that war and be in that situation and know what it's like to have to go through this. And I feel like sometimes you can't insult someone unless you've actually walked in their shoes, unless you've actually done the job that they've done. And if you don't do that, then you're not wise, you're not smart, because you don't know the kind of things you have to put up with on a daily basis. If you think about Bangladesh and poor countries, Pakistan, Afghanistan, police officers in these areas are incredibly corrupt. Now, the reason why they are is because the society is incredibly corrupt, and people who are police officers, are just genuine people from the society. They have to put up with society every single day. Now, if you're a police officer, a lot of people hate you, and therefore you might find your anger or more hate. You might find you build up more hatred for the general public. And this is a very kind of normal thing. Now, if you're taking 6 million Bangladeshi people and putting them in London and huge amounts of Pakistani people and Afghanistan people, you're lowering the standard of the people in England. And it's not just going to affect the people in England. It's going to affect it's not just going to affect them. It's not just going to it's not going to just affect their communities. It's going to affect the whole community. Everyone around is going to start feeling more isolated, more hostile towards each other, more anger. And if you start expressing this anger, and then you've got police officers that are trying to keep things at a very high standard, you might find that these people just become more aggressive towards the police officers, and then you have to realize that the police officers might want to become more aggressive towards I think it is very complicated when it comes to a police force, because you have to think, would you want to be on the streets? Knowing that the kind of people that they are, would you want to be on the streets dressed up as a police officer, having to deal with the sort of worst types of people in society, because they're the ones that usually get the police called on them? You have to hang around bad people all the time, and these people will affect you, because you would start seeing them as being, oh, they're human, I'm human, maybe I should be more like them, and your standard can lower. And I think it would be really hard. People want to keep England at a very high standard. A lot of people want to keep England at a very high standard, but they don't realise that by inviting huge amounts of migrants from all over the world, England's standard is going to become more similar to the standards that you would see in third world countries. The more third world people you invite into the country, the more of a third world England is going to become. And people don't seem to realise that, and you can't just take it out on police officers that say bad things. And I have a different perspective on it. I was insulting it at first, and then I'm kind of realizing, I shouldn't insult it unless I have actually been in their position and have actually seen what type of people they are insulting. If they're insulting people who for using unnecessary force, but if these people seem to want unnecessary force, I saw in the protest there was a guy who was screaming at the police officers. Literally, he wanted the police officers to attack him so that he could get some sort of black eye and then prove to the people that the police officers are bad. But it's not going to work. Why? Because people realise that, I think a lot of people would see that he wasn't there to be peaceful. He was there because he wanted to be aggressive. And I think if he was to go to people and say the police officers were aggressive towards me, I think a lot of them might know that actually, well, you were probably being aggressive towards them. And this, if you just see a 2-second clip or a short clip, you don't get the full picture. The full picture is that these people were watching you, probably could have been watching you for half hour. They could have been watching you for hours if you're locked up in a cell, and therefore something might seem completely out of the blue or unnecessary. But if you've known that if you've been listening to what they've been doing and seeing the types of people that they are and stuff, I think as a lot of people who are doing drugs and also doing alcohol, and it's messing with their head, and it's getting them to say and do and act in strange ways. And I think there is a high amount of disrespect for these people, and the police officers might get angry at these people because these people do not want to cooperate with the police. And yeah, I just want to say that because I don't want to be on the police's side, and I'm not, but I also don't want to. I think it would be wrong to be on the side of someone that just wants to snobbishly criticise without actually being in that. Did that lady actually? I think that lady said she was a police officer. Actually, that might have been the case. Actually, I just had a vision now. I think she might have said that she was actually a police officer and stuff. But I think the world is different now. I think she was in the past. Why did I just have that vision now? I didn't have that vision before. But I think the standard of the person now is much different to the standard 10 years ago. I hated my life when I was a child, but that was only because I felt invisible and ignored. But I knew the world was a really bad place. I knew a lot about the whole world, and I knew it was a really bad place, and I always saw England as being just so much better than most places around the world, and so I was happy about England. But yeah, over the last 10 years, it is fallen and fallen and fallen and fallen, and yeah, I think it would be so much worse for a person to be a police officer now than it was 10 years ago. So maybe I should have got that wrong on that lady who looks like a librarian. I think she actually was actually a police officer, but this was like, I don't know how long ago, but I don't know. Also, I think also the location. You know, if you're a police officer in Hampstead, I think it's going to be very different. You're going to find you have a very different view on things to being a police officer in Luton or something like that. You know, the more of a dangerous area you live in, you're going to find bad cops. England now is not very similar. There's very different areas. There's some very sort of posh, nice areas where you'd probably like to be a police officer around, and there are some areas that are really, really bad. And I think, yeah, if, I don't know where she's from, but she sounded very posh. She sounded like a good police officer, but yeah, if you got good police officers in good areas and you got them to criticise the police officers that have to work in the dangerous areas, that might be wrong too, because they don't know what it's like to live in an area full of Muslims versus other religions, and you know that there's a conflict all the time, and I don't know. I think domestic problems are usually the ones that are most called upon when it comes to the police. But yeah, just want to say all that.